The Pacific Ocean, 1941 to 1945. In the depths beneath the waves, a silent predator stalked the most powerful naval force in the Pacific, systematically destroying 214 warships through tactics the Japanese Navy had never anticipated, never prepared for, and could never fully counter. The submarine warfare campaign that unfolded across 4 brutal years would shatter every assumption about naval supremacy and underwater combat that Japanese naval doctrine had held sacred for decades. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Admiral Yamamoto Isoroku stood on the bridge of the battleship Nagato in December 1941, surveying a fleet that represented the culmination of Japan's naval ambitions. The combined fleet stretched across Tokyo Bay in perfect formation, a display of maritime power that had taken decades to construct and years to perfect. Massive battleships with their towering superstructures and heavy gun turrets dominated the formation, while aircraft carriers positioned strategically throughout the fleet demonstrated Japan's pioneering approach to naval aviation. The Japanese Navy of 1941 represented the third-largest naval force in the world, built through careful study of European naval tactics and systematic adaptation of proven strategies to Pacific conditions. Japanese naval architects had designed vessels specifically for the vast distances and unique challenges of Pacific warfare, creating ships that combined speed, firepower, and operational range in ways that Western navies had not achieved. The confidence radiating from Japanese naval leadership was not unfounded arrogance, but calculated assessment based on demonstrated capabilities. The attack on Pearl Harbor had validated Japanese tactical innovations and strategic planning. The subsequent victories at the Philippines, Dutch East Indies and Singapore had confirmed Japanese naval superiority across multiple combat scenarios and operational environments. Japanese naval doctrine in 1941 emphasized surface engagement and carrier-based aviation as the decisive factors in Pacific warfare. The Imperial Navy had spent years developing coordinated tactics that integrated battleship firepower with aircraft carrier operations, creating combined arms approaches that had proven devastatingly effective against Allied forces throughout the early war period. This doctrinal framework addressed British heavy cruisers, American aircraft carriers, Dutch destroyers, and Australian light vessels with comprehensive tactical preparations. Japanese naval planners had conducted extensive analysis of potential enemy capabilities and developed specific countermeasures for every conventional threat they anticipated encountering during Pacific operations. However, submarines occupied a peripheral position in Japanese naval thinking. The Imperial Navy viewed underwater vessels as auxiliary forces, suitable for reconnaissance and occasional harassment, rather than primary combat platforms capable of decisive strategic impact. This assessment reflected traditional naval thinking that emphasized surface engagement as the ultimate arbiter of maritime supremacy. Japanese submarine doctrine focused on fleet support rather than independent operations. Imperial Navy submarines were designed and deployed to gather intelligence, conduct reconnaissance missions, and provide tactical support for surface operations, rather than pursuing autonomous campaigns against enemy shipping or naval forces. This limited conceptualization of submarine capabilities would prove catastrophically inadequate when confronted with Allied submarine warfare strategies that treated underwater vessels as primary strategic weapons rather than auxiliary support platforms. The Japanese Navy had prepared extensively for conventional naval warfare, while remaining fundamentally unprepared for the underwater campaign that would systematically destroy their maritime power. While Japanese naval forces celebrated their early victories and refined their surface combat tactics, Allied submarine forces were preparing for a fundamentally different kind of warfare. The United States Navy Submarine Service had spent years developing capabilities and strategies that would transform underwater vessels from auxiliary scouts into primary strategic weapons. The USS Wahoo, under the command of Commander Dudley Morton, represented the evolution of American submarine warfare thinking. Morton's aggressive tactical approach emphasized independent hunting operations rather than fleet support missions, pursuing enemy vessels across vast operational areas with systematic determination that Japanese naval planners had never anticipated. American submarine commanders were developing tactics that challenged fundamental assumptions about underwater warfare limitations. Traditional submarine doctrine emphasized stealth and evasion, avoiding direct confrontation with superior surface forces through careful positioning and strategic withdrawal when detected by enemy vessels. Morton and commanders like him pursued a radically different approach that emphasized persistent attack and tactical aggression. They positioned their submarines in heavily defended shipping lanes, maintained contact with enemy formations despite detection risks, and pressed attacks against superior forces through innovative positioning and coordinated maneuvering. The USS Tang, commanded by Richard O'Kane, demonstrated the operational capabilities that emerged from this aggressive tactical philosophy. O'Kane's systematic hunting approach involved detailed intelligence analysis, careful route planning, and sustained operations in areas where Japanese naval forces expected minimal submarine activity. These commanders were not pursuing reckless aggression, but calculated risk-taking based on comprehensive understanding of enemy patterns and limitations. They had identified systematic weaknesses in Japanese anti-submarine capabilities and developed specific tactics to exploit those vulnerabilities, while minimizing their own exposure to effective countermeasures. The submarine warfare tactics emerging from American operational experience emphasized sustainability and systematic impact rather than dramatic individual victories. Commanders focused on consistent pressure against Japanese shipping and naval forces, creating cumulative effects that would prove more devastating than spectacular but isolated successes. American submarine forces were also benefiting from technological innovations that Japanese naval intelligence had not fully understood or adequately countered. Advanced torpedo systems, improved sonar capabilities, and enhanced communications equipment provided operational advantages that would prove decisive in sustained underwater campaigns. The Mark 14 torpedo, despite its initial reliability problems, represented technological sophistication that Japanese naval forces were not prepared to counter effectively. When properly functioning, these weapons provided American submarines with striking power that could damage or destroy the largest Japanese naval vessels under favorable tactical conditions. More importantly, American submarine commanders were developing systematic approaches to intelligence gathering and operational planning that enabled sustained campaigns rather than opportunistic attacks. They were creating comprehensive understanding of Japanese shipping patterns, naval movements, and defensive arrangements that would guide strategic targeting throughout the Pacific War. Japanese naval strategy in 1942 was built upon fundamental assumptions about maritime warfare that had dominated naval thinking since the Battle of Jutland. The Imperial Navy's theoretical framework emphasized decisive surface engagement as the ultimate arbiter of naval supremacy, with all other naval activities serving to enable or support major fleet actions between capital ships. This doctrinal foundation influenced every aspect of Japanese naval planning and resource allocation. Battleships received priority in construction schedules and operational assignments because they were considered the primary instruments of naval victory. Aircraft carriers were valued for their ability to provide tactical support for surface engagements, rather than as independent strategic weapons capable of determining war outcomes. Japanese anti-submarine warfare preparations reflected this surface-oriented thinking. The Imperial Navy treated submarine threats as tactical problems that could be managed through conventional destroyer and aircraft patrols, rather than strategic challenges requiring comprehensive defensive systems and dedicated resources. Admiral Koga Minichi, who would later assume command of the combined fleet, exemplified this analytical approach. His staff studies emphasized surface engagement scenarios and carrier aviation coordination, while treating submarine warfare as a secondary consideration that could be addressed through routine defensive measures. The Japanese Navy's intelligence assessment of Allied submarine capabilities was based on traditional underwater warfare models that emphasized reconnaissance and harassment rather than sustained strategic campaigns. Imperial Navy analysts recognized that Allied submarines possessed improved torpedoes and enhanced operational range. But they did not anticipate the systematic hunting strategies that would emerge from American operational doctrine. This intelligence failure reflected broader assumptions about submarine warfare limitations that influenced Japanese defensive planning throughout the early war period. Imperial Navy strategists believed that submarines could not sustain effective operations in heavily defended areas, and would avoid confrontation with superior surface forces equipped with adequate anti-submarine capabilities. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Japanese naval training programs reinforced these assumptions by emphasizing surface engagement tactics, while providing minimal preparation for sustained anti-submarine operations. Destroyer crews received extensive training in surface combat and anti-aircraft procedures, but limited instruction in submarine detection and depth charge employment under combat conditions. The Imperial Navy's resource allocation decisions reflected these doctrinal priorities. Industrial capacity was directed toward battleship construction and aircraft carrier development, while anti-submarine warfare received minimal attention in production planning and technological development programs. Japanese shipbuilding programs emphasized offensive capabilities rather than defensive systems, producing vessels optimized for surface engagement rather than submarine resistance. Ship design specifications prioritize speed, firepower, and operational range while treating underwater protection as a secondary consideration that could be addressed through routine defensive measures. This strategic framework would prove inadequate when confronted with Allied submarine warfare campaigns that treated surface vessels as primary targets, rather than avoiding confrontation with superior forces. The Japanese Navy had prepared extensively for conventional surface warfare while remaining fundamentally unprepared for the systematic underwater campaign that would destroy their maritime supremacy. The first systematic submarine attacks against Japanese naval forces occurred during the Guadalcanal campaign of August 1942, when American submarines began implementing the aggressive tactical doctrines that had been developing throughout the early war period. These initial encounters revealed the gap between Japanese anti-submarine preparations and the reality of sustained underwater warfare. The USS Growler, under Lieutenant Commander Howard Gilmore, demonstrated the operational capabilities that Japanese naval planners had not anticipated. Gilmore's aggressive positioning in the Solomon Islands shipping lanes resulted in multiple successful attacks against Japanese destroyers and transport vessels, despite intensive anti-submarine patrols in the operational area. Japanese naval commanders initially attributed these submarine successes to tactical luck, rather than systematic capability. The Imperial Navy's intelligence analysis suggested that Allied submarines were exploiting temporary vulnerabilities, rather than implementing comprehensive strategies that could sustain effective operations against defended targets. Admiral Yamamoto's staff assessments of early submarine encounters emphasized the isolated nature of successful attacks and the limited overall impact on Japanese naval operations. These analyses suggested that improved anti-submarine patrols and enhanced defensive procedures would reduce submarine effectiveness to manageable levels within acceptable operational timeframes. The Japanese Navy's response to early submarine attacks focused on tactical modifications rather than strategic reconceptualization. Imperial Navy commanders increased destroyer patrols, enhanced aircraft reconnaissance, and implemented improved communication procedures while maintaining fundamental assumptions about submarine warfare limitations and appropriate countermeasures. Commander Mochitsura Hashimoto, who would later command the submarine I-58, observed these early encounters from the Japanese perspective and noted the systematic underestimation of Allied submarine capabilities among Imperial Navy leadership. Japanese naval doctrine continued to treat submarine threats as manageable tactical problems, rather than strategic challenges requiring comprehensive defensive reorganization. The USS Wahoo's November 1942 patrol in the Yellow Sea demonstrated the limitations of Japanese anti-submarine responses. Commander Morton's systematic hunting approach resulted in multiple successful attacks against Japanese shipping, despite intensive defensive measures, revealing the inadequacy of conventional anti-submarine tactics against determined and well-equipped underwater forces. Japanese naval intelligence continued to characterize these submarine successes as exceptional achievements rather than indicators of systematic Allied capabilities. Imperial Navy analysts maintained that submarine warfare could not sustain effective pressure against properly defended targets, and that surface superiority would ultimately prevail through conventional naval engagement. The January 1943 Battle of Rennell Island illustrated the persistent Japanese focus on surface engagement despite mounting evidence of submarine effectiveness. Imperial Navy tactical planning for this operation emphasized destroyer and aircraft coordination while treating submarine threats as secondary considerations that could be managed through routine defensive measures. Admiral Koga's analysis of early 1943 submarine encounters acknowledged increasing Allied effectiveness, but maintained that improved Japanese anti-submarine capabilities would restore acceptable operational security within reasonable timeframes. This assessment reflected continued adherence to surface-oriented strategic thinking, despite accumulating evidence of submarine warfare's strategic potential. The Japanese Navy's institutional response to early submarine attacks revealed the psychological barriers that prevented recognition of paradigm-shifting tactical developments. Imperial Navy leadership remained committed to surface engagement doctrines that had guided Japanese naval success, while struggling to comprehend the implications of systematic underwater warfare. American submarine technological capabilities in 1943 exceeded Japanese anti-submarine systems by margins that Imperial Navy intelligence had not accurately assessed. The Mark 14 torpedo, despite its controversial reliability record, provided American submarines with striking power that Japanese naval vessels were not adequately protected against. The Mark 14's advanced guidance system and enhanced explosive payload created vulnerabilities in Japanese ship design that had not been anticipated during construction planning. Imperial Navy vessels were built to withstand conventional torpedo attacks, but lacked protection against the sustained precision strikes that American submarine commanders were implementing. American submarine sonar systems provided detection capabilities that enabled systematic tracking of Japanese naval movements across operational areas that the Imperial Navy considered secure. These technological advantages allowed submarine commanders to position their vessels for optimal attack approaches, while avoiding effective countermeasures from Japanese anti-submarine forces. The SJ radar system installed on American submarines created tactical advantages that Japanese naval planners had not incorporated into their defensive calculations. This technology enabled surface attacks during night operations, when Japanese visual detection systems were ineffective, creating temporal windows for submarine operations that Imperial Navy defenses could not adequately cover. Japanese anti-submarine warfare technology lagged significantly behind American offensive capabilities. Imperial Navy depth charges were designed for attacks against conventional submarines operating at limited depths, rather than the advanced underwater vessels that American forces were deploying throughout the Pacific theater. The Type 95 depth charge, which represented the standard Japanese anti-submarine weapon, lacked the sophisticated fusing mechanisms and enhanced explosive power that would be required to counter American submarines operating at extended depths with improved hull construction and damage resistance capabilities. Japanese sonar systems provided detection capabilities that were adequate for conventional anti-submarine operations, but insufficient for tracking the advanced submarines that American forces were employing. Imperial Navy acoustic detection equipment could not reliably maintain contact with targets that were implementing systematic evasion procedures in complex acoustic environments. The Imperial Navy's hydrophone networks, which form the foundation of Japanese coastal defense systems, were designed to detect conventional submarine approaches rather than the sophisticated infiltration tactics that American submarine commanders were implementing. These fixed installations could not adapt to the varying operational patterns that characterized aggressive submarine warfare. American submarine communication systems enabled coordination between multiple vessels that Japanese naval intelligence had not anticipated. Coordinated submarine operations created tactical situations that Imperial Navy anti-submarine forces were not prepared to counter through conventional defensive procedures. The development of submarine wolfpack tactics, adapted from German operational experience, provided American forces with systematic approaches to overwhelming Japanese defensive capabilities through coordinated attacks that exceeded the response capacity of individual escort formations. Japanese naval construction priorities had emphasized offensive capabilities rather than defensive systems, creating systematic vulnerabilities that submarine warfare tactics were specifically designed to exploit. Imperial Navy vessels possessed impressive firepower and operational capabilities, but lacked adequate protection against sustained underwater attacks. By mid-1943, statistical analysis of submarine warfare results revealed patterns that Japanese naval intelligence could no longer dismiss as tactical anomalies or exceptional circumstances. American submarines were achieving consistent success rates that indicated systematic capability rather than opportunistic advantage. The USS Tang's patrol records demonstrated strike rates that exceeded Japanese projections by factors that suggested fundamental flaws in Imperial Navy anti-submarine assessments. Commander O'Kane's systematic hunting approach was producing results that could not be explained through conventional analysis of submarine warfare limitations. Japanese shipping losses to submarine attack were accumulating at rates that threatened operational sustainability across multiple theater areas. Imperial Navy logistics planners were forced to acknowledge that submarine warfare was creating strategic constraints that surface naval superiority could not adequately address. The USS Silverside's operational record illustrated the cumulative impact of sustained submarine campaigns against Japanese naval and merchant shipping. Multiple successful patrols by individual submarines were creating aggregate effects that exceeded the loss replacement capacity of Japanese shipbuilding programs. Admiral Koga's staff analyses of submarine warfare statistics revealed trends that challenged fundamental assumptions about underwater combat effectiveness and strategic impact. The systematic nature of American submarine successes suggested capabilities that Japanese naval doctrine had not adequately prepared to counter. Monthly shipping loss reports indicated that submarine attacks were not randomly distributed, but followed patterns that suggested comprehensive intelligence and coordinated operational planning. Japanese naval intelligence was forced to acknowledge that Allied submarine forces possessed systematic understanding of Imperial Navy movements and defensive arrangements. The USS Drum's patrol successes in heavily defended areas demonstrated that American submarines could sustain effective operations despite intensive anti-submarine measures. These achievements suggested that conventional Japanese defensive tactics were inadequate against determined submarine commanders employing advanced tactical doctrines. Statistical correlation between submarine patrol areas and Japanese shipping losses revealed that American forces were implementing systematic targeting strategies rather than pursuing opportunistic attacks. This analytical insight suggested that submarine warfare had evolved beyond tactical harassment to strategic campaign capability. The USS Growler's multiple successful patrols in the same operational areas demonstrated that American submarines could return to previously attacked locations and achieve continued success despite enhanced Japanese defensive measures. This pattern indicated tactical sophistication that Imperial Navy anti-submarine doctrine had not anticipated. Japanese naval construction statistics revealed that submarine attacks were destroying vessels faster than shipbuilding programs could replace them in critical categories. Imperial Navy planners were forced to acknowledge that submarine warfare was creating strategic attrition that threatened long-term operational capability. Commander Hashimoto's analysis of submarine encounter reports identified systematic American tactical approaches that suggested comprehensive training and coordinated operational doctrine, rather than individual initiative by exceptional submarine commanders. The emergence of clear patterns in submarine warfare statistics during late 1943 forced Japanese naval leadership to confront the reality that American underwater forces were implementing systematic strategies rather than pursuing opportunistic attacks. The destruction of 214 Japanese warships over the course of the Pacific War represented methodical campaign execution rather than accumulation of tactical successes. Analysis of submarine attack timing revealed coordination that indicated central planning and strategic direction rather than independent operations by individual submarine commanders. American forces were implementing comprehensive targeting strategies that prioritized specific vessel types and operational capabilities based on strategic rather than tactical considerations. The USS Harder's patrol record demonstrated systematic targeting of Japanese destroyers and escort vessels, creating cumulative effects that degraded anti-submarine defensive capabilities across multiple operational areas. Commander Samuel Dealey's tactical approach revealed understanding of how individual attacks contributed to broader strategic objectives. Japanese convoy routing became increasingly constrained, as submarine forces demonstrated capability to intercept shipping across vast ocean areas. Imperial Navy logistics planners were forced to implement extensive detours and defensive measures that reduced operational efficiency while failing to eliminate submarine threats. The systematic nature of American submarine operations became evident through analysis of attack patterns that revealed comprehensive intelligence about Japanese naval movements, shipping schedules, and defensive arrangements. Allied forces possessed understanding of Imperial Navy activities that enabled predictive targeting rather than reactive opportunism. Multiple submarine patrols in coordinated operational areas created tactical situations that overwhelmed Japanese anti-submarine responses through concentration of force that exceeded defensive capacity. These coordinated operations demonstrated strategic thinking that Imperial Navy doctrine had not anticipated or prepared to counter. The USS Flash's record of successful attacks against multiple vessel types in various operational environments illustrated the versatility and systematic preparation that characterized American submarine warfare doctrine. Commander Reuben Whitaker's achievements demonstrated capabilities that went beyond individual tactical excellence to systematic operational effectiveness. Statistical analysis of submarine patrol areas revealed that American forces were implementing area denial strategies that created no-go zones for Japanese shipping, despite nominal Imperial Navy control of those ocean areas. This strategic application of submarine warfare created effects that traditional naval doctrine could not adequately address. The cumulative impact of systematic submarine operations was transforming the strategic balance of Pacific warfare in ways that Japanese naval leadership was struggling to comprehend or counter. Traditional measures of naval superiority were proving inadequate for assessing the strategic situation when underwater forces could systematically destroy surface vessels. The USS Barb's innovative tactical approaches, including surface attacks using deck guns and coordinated operations with other submarines, demonstrated that American submarine warfare was continuing to evolve and adapt in ways that kept ahead of Japanese countermeasure development. The destruction of 214 Japanese warships represented not just accumulated tactical successes, but systematic campaign execution that had achieved strategic effects through methodical application of submarine warfare principles that Japanese naval doctrine had never adequately understood or prepared to counter. The spring of 1943 marked the beginning of what Japanese naval historians would later call the Great Hemorrhaging, a period when submarine warfare transitioned from tactical harassment to strategic devastation. Commander Eugene Fluckey aboard the USS Barb demonstrated the evolution of American submarine doctrine through operations that systematically dismantled Japanese confidence in their maritime security. Fluckey's approach represented a fundamental shift in submarine warfare philosophy. Rather than pursuing individual targets of opportunity, he implemented comprehensive hunting strategies that treated entire operational areas as hunting grounds, where systematic pressure could achieve cumulative strategic effects. His methodology involved detailed intelligence analysis, careful route planning, and sustained operations that created persistent threats to Japanese naval movements. The psychological impact of Fluckey's campaigns extended far beyond the physical destruction of Japanese vessels. His systematic approach to submarine warfare created an atmosphere of uncertainty and fear among Japanese naval personnel, who could no longer predict when or where underwater attacks might occur. This psychological warfare dimension multiplied the strategic effectiveness of submarine operations through its impact on Japanese operational planning and crew morale. Japanese naval commanders found themselves confronting a form of warfare that their training and experience had not prepared them to understand or counter effectively. The systematic nature of American submarine operations created tactical situations that required fundamental reconceptualization of maritime security and defensive strategy. The USS Bowfin, under Commander Walter Griffith, exemplified the methodical approach that characterized American submarine warfare during this period. Griffith's patrol records demonstrated consistent success across multiple operational areas through systematic application of intelligence-driven targeting and coordinated tactical execution. Griffith's operational methodology emphasized sustainability and systematic impact rather than spectacular individual achievements. His approach involved careful resource management, systematic intelligence gathering, and coordinated operations with other submarine commands that created synergistic effects exceeding the sum of individual patrol results. The success of commanders like Griffith demonstrated that American submarine warfare had evolved into a systematic discipline capable of producing predictable strategic results through consistent application of proven methodologies. This transformation represented a paradigm shift that Japanese naval doctrine had not anticipated or prepared to counter. Japanese attempts to adapt their anti-submarine warfare capabilities during this period revealed the depth of their doctrinal limitations. Imperial Navy commanders implemented enhanced patrol schedules, improved communication procedures, and modified convoy routing without achieving significant reduction in submarine effectiveness. The failure of conventional Japanese countermeasures reflected fundamental misunderstanding of the systematic nature of American submarine operations. Imperial Navy responses addressed symptoms rather than causes, focusing on tactical modifications rather than strategic reconceptualization of underwater warfare capabilities. Commander Richard O'Kane aboard the USS Tang represented the pinnacle of American submarine tactical development during this period. O'Kane's aggressive hunting strategies produced results that exceeded previous submarine warfare achievements, while demonstrating the potential for systematic underwater campaigns to achieve decisive strategic impact. O'Kane's tactical innovations included coordinated surface attacks, systematic exploitation of Japanese convoy vulnerabilities, and persistent operations in heavily defended areas that demonstrated American submarine capabilities exceeded Japanese defensive responses. The cumulative impact of systematic submarine operations during the spring and summer of 1943 forced Japanese naval leadership to acknowledge that their fundamental assumptions about underwater warfare capabilities required comprehensive revision. American submarine warfare effectiveness during 1943 depended critically upon intelligence capabilities that Japanese naval security had not adequately protected against. The systematic nature of submarine targeting reflected comprehensive understanding of Japanese naval movements, shipping schedules, and defensive arrangements that enabled predictive, rather than reactive operational planning. Ultra-intelligence intercepts provided American submarine commanders with detailed information about Japanese convoy routes, timing, and defensive arrangements that transformed submarine warfare from opportunistic hunting to systematic campaign execution. This intelligence advantage created tactical situations where American submarines could position themselves for optimal attack approaches while avoiding effective Japanese countermeasures. The impact of superior intelligence extended beyond tactical targeting to strategic campaign planning that enabled coordinated submarine operations across multiple operational areas. American submarine commands could implement comprehensive strategies that concentrated force against specific Japanese vulnerabilities, while maintaining operational security that prevented effective Imperial Navy responses. Commander Lawson Ramage aboard the USS Parche demonstrated the tactical advantages that superior intelligence provided to American submarine operations. Ramage's systematic exploitation of Japanese shipping patterns enabled sustained campaigns that achieved cumulative effects, exceeding the impact of individual patrol successes. Japanese naval intelligence failures during this period reflected institutional limitations that prevented recognition of systematic American intelligence capabilities. Imperial Navy security procedures were designed to counter conventional espionage rather than the sophisticated signals intelligence that was providing American forces with comprehensive understanding of Japanese naval activities. The systematic nature of American intelligence operations created information advantages that enabled submarine commanders to anticipate Japanese responses and adapt their tactical approaches accordingly. This analytical capability transformed submarine warfare from reactive opportunism to proactive campaign execution that achieved strategic objectives through methodical application of tactical superiority. Lieutenant Commander Samuel Dealey aboard the USS Harder exemplified the operational effectiveness that superior intelligence enabled during systematic submarine campaigns. Dealey's aggressive targeting of Japanese escort vessels reflected strategic understanding of how individual attacks contributed to broader campaign objectives. The intelligence revolution in submarine warfare represented more than tactical advantage. It demonstrated the strategic potential of systematic information warfare to multiply the effectiveness of conventional military capabilities. American submarine forces achieved results that exceeded their numerical strength through superior understanding of enemy capabilities and limitations. Japanese attempts to enhance their intelligence security during this period proved inadequate against the sophisticated American signals intelligence capabilities that were providing submarine commanders with real-time information about Imperial Navy movements and defensive arrangements. The failure of Japanese counterintelligence efforts reflected institutional limitations that prevented recognition of the systematic nature of American intelligence operations. Imperial Navy security procedures addressed conventional espionage threats while remaining vulnerable to the advanced signals intelligence that was enabling American submarine warfare success. The strategic implications of American intelligence superiority extended beyond submarine warfare to fundamental transformation of Pacific naval operations. Superior information capabilities enabled systematic campaign execution that achieved strategic objectives through coordinated application of tactical advantages across multiple operational domains. The mounting evidence of systematic submarine warfare effectiveness forced Japanese naval leadership to implement comprehensive modifications to their operational procedures and defensive strategies. Admiral Somu Toyoda, who assumed command of the combined fleet in May 1944, directed systematic analysis of submarine warfare patterns and development of enhanced countermeasures. Toyoda's analytical approach emphasized statistical evaluation of submarine attack patterns, identification of systematic vulnerabilities in Japanese defensive arrangements, and development of modified tactical procedures that could reduce submarine effectiveness to manageable levels. The Japanese response included enhanced destroyer patrols, improved aircraft reconnaissance, modified convoy routing, and upgraded anti-submarine warfare equipment. These modifications represented systematic attempts to address submarine warfare through conventional naval responses rather than fundamental reconceptualization of underwater combat capabilities. Enhanced destroyer patrols involved increased allocation of escort vessels to merchant convoys and naval formations, creating multiple layers of anti-submarine defense that were designed to detect and destroy attacking submarines before they could achieve effective targeting positions. The implementation of improved aircraft reconnaissance included systematic patrol schedules that provided enhanced coverage of critical shipping routes and naval operational areas. Japanese naval aviation allocated significant resources to anti-submarine warfare missions that complemented surface vessel defensive operations. Modified convoy routing attempted to reduce submarine targeting opportunities through implementation of unpredictable scheduling and route selection that prevented American forces from establishing systematic interception positions. These modifications required significant coordination between naval commands and merchant shipping authorities. Upgraded anti-submarine warfare equipment included enhanced sonar systems, improved depth charge designs, and modified tactical procedures for submarine detection and attack. These technological improvements represented systematic attempts to match American submarine capabilities through enhanced Japanese defensive systems. Despite comprehensive implementation of enhanced countermeasures, Japanese naval forces continued experiencing submarine losses at rates that indicated fundamental inadequacy of conventional anti-submarine warfare approaches. The systematic nature of American submarine operations overwhelmed defensive modifications that addressed tactical symptoms rather than strategic realities. The failure of Japanese adaptation attempts reflected institutional limitations that prevented recognition of the paradigm shift that submarine warfare represented. Imperial Navy responses remained committed to surface-oriented naval doctrine, while struggling to comprehend the strategic implications of systematic underwater warfare. Commander Zenji Orita, who served aboard multiple Japanese submarines during this period, observed the systematic inadequacy of Imperial Navy anti-submarine responses and noted the fundamental conceptual barriers that prevented effective adaptation to American submarine warfare capabilities. Japanese naval training programs during this period attempted to address submarine warfare through enhanced anti-submarine instruction for surface vessel crews. These training modifications emphasized improved detection procedures, coordinated tactical responses, and systematic application of anti-submarine weapons and equipment. The limited effectiveness of enhanced training reflected the fundamental inadequacy of conventional anti-submarine warfare doctrine when confronted with systematic submarine campaigns that exploited strategic rather than tactical vulnerabilities in Japanese naval operations. The systematic nature of American submarine operations created psychological effects among Japanese naval personnel that multiplied the strategic impact of physical destruction through its influence on operational planning, crew morale, and tactical decision-making. The persistent threat of submarine attack transformed Japanese naval operations from confident execution of established procedures to cautious navigation of persistent underwater dangers. Japanese naval crews developed heightened anxiety about submarine attacks that affected their operational effectiveness and tactical decision-making. The unpredictability of submarine encounters created psychological stress that degraded crew performance and reduced the operational efficiency of Japanese naval formations. The psychological impact of submarine warfare extended beyond individual crew members, to systematic modification of Japanese naval planning procedures. Imperial Navy commanders found themselves implementing defensive measures that prioritized submarine threat mitigation over optimal tactical positioning and operational effectiveness. Commander Tamechi Hara, who served aboard multiple Japanese destroyers during this period, documented the psychological effects of persistent submarine threats on Japanese naval operations. His observations revealed the systematic degradation of Japanese operational confidence that resulted from sustained submarine warfare pressure. The uncertainty created by systematic submarine operations forced Japanese naval commanders to implement extensive defensive procedures that reduced operational efficiency, while failing to eliminate submarine threats. These defensive modifications created tactical limitations that American submarine commanders systematically exploited through continued operational innovation. Japanese merchant marine crews experienced even more severe psychological effects from submarine warfare, with many experienced seamen refusing assignments to routes where submarine attacks had occurred frequently. This personnel shortage created operational limitations that compounded the physical effects of submarine attacks on Japanese shipping capabilities. The cumulative psychological impact of submarine warfare contributed to strategic effects that exceeded the physical destruction of Japanese vessels. The persistent threat of underwater attack created operational constraints that limited Japanese naval effectiveness, while enabling American submarine forces to achieve strategic objectives through systematic psychological pressure. Lieutenant Mochitsura Hashimoto, who later commanded the submarine I-58, observed the psychological transformation of Japanese naval operations during this period, and noted the systematic degradation of operational confidence that resulted from persistent submarine warfare pressure. The psychological warfare dimension of submarine operations demonstrated the strategic potential of systematic threat creation to multiply the effectiveness of conventional military capabilities. American submarine forces achieved strategic effects that exceeded their numerical strength through persistent creation of operational uncertainty among Japanese naval forces. Japanese attempts to address the psychological effects of submarine warfare through enhanced crew training and modified operational procedures proved inadequate against the systematic nature of American submarine operations. The persistent threat of underwater attack created psychological conditions that conventional military responses could not effectively counter. The strategic implications of psychological warfare extended beyond submarine operations to fundamental transformation of Japanese naval culture and operational philosophy. The systematic threat of submarine attack created defensive mentalities that reduced the aggressive tactical approaches that had characterized early Japanese naval successes. The systematic effectiveness of American submarine warfare during 1943 and 1944 prompted intensive Japanese efforts to develop technological countermeasures that could restore tactical balance through enhanced detection capabilities and improved anti-submarine weapon systems. Japanese naval research programs directed significant resources toward development of advanced sonar systems that could provide reliable detection of American submarines operating at extended depths with sophisticated noise reduction capabilities. These technological development efforts represented systematic attempts to match American submarine capabilities through enhanced Japanese defensive systems. The Type 3 sonar system represented the most advanced Japanese anti-submarine detection capability developed during this period. This system provided enhanced acoustic detection range and improved target discrimination that enabled Japanese anti-submarine forces to identify and track American submarines operating in previously secure areas. Despite technological improvements in detection capabilities, Japanese anti-submarine warfare remained fundamentally limited by tactical doctrines that emphasized reactive responses rather than proactive campaign strategies. Enhanced detection systems provided improved tactical information without enabling strategic solutions to systematic submarine warfare campaigns. American submarine technological development during this period maintained significant advantages over Japanese countermeasure capabilities through continued innovation in torpedo systems, navigation equipment, and communication technologies. The Mark 18 electric torpedo eliminated the wake signatures that had enabled Japanese forces to detect conventional torpedo attacks. The development of improved submarine radar systems provided American underwater forces with surface detection capabilities that enabled night surface attacks when Japanese visual detection systems were ineffective. These technological advantages created tactical opportunities that Japanese anti-submarine forces could not adequately counter through conventional defensive procedures. Enhanced submarine communication systems enabled coordination between multiple American submarines that created tactical situations exceeding the response capacity of Japanese anti-submarine forces. Coordinated submarine operations overwhelmed defensive capabilities through concentration of force that Japanese countermeasures could not effectively address. Japanese depth charge development during this period focused on enhanced explosive power and improved fusing mechanisms that could provide increased effectiveness against American submarines operating at extended depths. The Type 3 depth charge represented systematic attempts to match American submarine capabilities through enhanced Japanese offensive systems. The limited effectiveness of enhanced Japanese depth charges reflected fundamental tactical limitations rather than technological inadequacy. American submarine commanders adapted their operational procedures to minimize exposure to depth charge attacks while maintaining effective striking capabilities against Japanese targets. The technological competition between American submarine capabilities and Japanese countermeasures demonstrated the strategic importance of sustained innovation in maintaining tactical advantages. American forces achieved superior results through systematic technological development that stayed ahead of Japanese defensive adaptations. Japanese attempts to develop submarine warfare capabilities during this period reflected recognition of American submarine effectiveness combined with institutional limitations that prevented comprehensive adoption of underwater warfare doctrines. Imperial Navy submarine development remained constrained by surface-oriented strategic thinking that limited technological applications. By December 1943, comprehensive statistical analysis of submarine warfare results provided undeniable evidence that American underwater forces had achieved strategic impact that exceeded all previous Japanese assessments of submarine warfare potential. The systematic destruction of Japanese naval and merchant vessels had reached levels that threatened operational sustainability across multiple theater areas. Japanese naval intelligence analysis revealed that submarine attacks were destroying vessels at rates that exceeded shipbuilding replacement capacity in critical categories. These statistical trends indicated that submarine warfare was creating strategic attrition that would degrade Japanese naval capabilities over extended time periods, regardless of surface engagement outcomes. The USS Flasher's patrol record during this period exemplified the systematic effectiveness that characterized American submarine operations. Commander Reuben Whitaker's achievements demonstrated consistent success across multiple patrol areas through systematic application of intelligence-driven targeting and coordinated tactical execution. Statistical correlation between submarine patrol areas and Japanese shipping losses revealed comprehensive American understanding of Imperial Navy logistics and operational patterns. This analytical insight suggested that submarine warfare had evolved beyond tactical opportunism to strategic campaign capability based on systematic intelligence and coordinated operational planning. Japanese convoy routing analysis indicated that submarine forces had achieved area denial effects that created no-go zones for Japanese shipping despite nominal Imperial Navy control of those ocean areas. This strategic application of submarine warfare created operational constraints that traditional naval doctrine could not adequately address. The USS Tang's operational achievements under Commander Richard O'Kane provided statistical validation of systematic submarine warfare effectiveness. O'Kane's tactical innovations and consistent success rates demonstrated that American submarine capabilities exceeded Japanese defensive responses across multiple operational scenarios. Monthly shipping loss statistics revealed that submarine attacks were following systematic patterns that indicated comprehensive operational planning rather than random tactical opportunism. Japanese naval intelligence was forced to acknowledge that Allied submarine forces possessed strategic understanding that enabled predictive rather than reactive operational approaches. The statistical reality of systematic submarine effectiveness forced Japanese naval leadership to confront fundamental inadequacy of their anti-submarine warfare capabilities and strategic understanding of underwater combat potential. The accumulating evidence indicated that conventional naval responses were insufficient to counter systematic submarine campaigns. Analysis of submarine attack patterns during late 1943 revealed coordination that indicated central planning and strategic direction rather than independent operations by individual submarine commanders. American forces were implementing comprehensive targeting strategies that prioritized specific vessel types based on strategic rather than tactical considerations. The emergence of clear statistical patterns forced Japanese naval leadership to acknowledge that submarine warfare represented systematic strategic capability rather than tactical harassment. The destruction of Japanese vessels was following predictable patterns that indicated comprehensive American understanding of Imperial Navy vulnerabilities and systematic exploitation of those weaknesses. Japanese attempts to modify their operational procedures based on statistical analysis of submarine attack patterns proved inadequate against the systematic nature of American submarine warfare. Statistical understanding of submarine effectiveness did not translate into effective countermeasures that could restore tactical balance or strategic security. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.